to neck and face muscles, as well as to the brain. Humans have carotid arteries in each side of the neck. Those are called left and right carotid arteries, and both of them have their bifurcations. Thus bifurcate to the inner carotid artery and common carotid artery, as well as other arteries. Carotid arteries can succumb to a number of fatal diseases like arteriosclerosis, strokes, aneurysms, stenosis, and other different fatal diseases. The main problem with these diseases is their detection and their recognition by the clinicians. Thus, in this paper, we aimed to detect one of the, at least to start a pre-step for stenosis detection and characterization, whose pre-step is to detect the wall and lumen of the carotid arteries. This was done using convolutional neural networks, which proved to be very successful in classification of images, as well as detection of the objects on those clinical images. Here, unit-based and segment-based architectures were used to do this binary classification, and the aim was to detect a carotid artery wall as a pre-step for detection of stenosis and its characterizations, to recognize which type of stenosis is presented, and if it's calcified or is it in lipid state. So carotid artery, like I already said, is bifurcated in two parts, in the inner carotid artery and outer carotid artery, or common carotid artery, which is classified by clinicians. As you can see on image 1, here is transversal carotid cross-section of the carotid artery is presented. And you can see a small formation of plaque at the bottom. The aim was to detect at first the wall, and then to detect the lumen, and at the end to detect that plaque and characterize it. Even though you can quite easily acquire images through MRI or ultrasound or X-ray, it is hard to detect these formations of plaque and to separate it from the artery wall, and to recognize which type of the plaque exists there. So the clinicians made great efforts to study the types of plaque and to characterize them the best they could. but with the development of neural networks and with the development of computer science and computers and computer processors, we could take their studies and make an optimized process of detection of corrected walls, of detection of corrected walls, and at the end of plaque. So here, like I already said, unit-based and segment-based neural networks were used, and models were evaluated on a set of ultrasound images with a resolution of 512 times 512, and was evaluated in terms of dice coefficient. The networks were trained using the combination of binary cross-entropy and dice coefficient. The first architecture unit was modified at the start of the process. We modified the network with the basis of its depth, and we added additional layers at the end of the unit. The main difference between the original unit network and this modified unit network is that every encoder block here has a convolutional layer of 3x3, and it's followed by 2x2 max pool layer. And while each decoder layer has 2x2 up convolution layer, and the skip connection would be followed by 1x1 convolutional layers with a sigmoid activation function. Additionally, these convolution layers are arranged so that height and width of the output image is the same as on the input. Also, the difference between the original and unit architecture used here is that it uses serial normalization after each convolutional layer, which proved to give better results in previous studies. This task of binary cross-entropy of segmented images was taken in consideration, and the results were evaluated using the F1 score or dice coefficient on two separate sets: the colored set and the black and white set, which can be seen on the figure 2. This figure at the bottom, I cannot see which figure it is because of the toolbar. This colored set has already, it's easier to detect than black and white set, because the black and white set does not have anything that could indicate where the lumen or the wall is, unlike the colored set, which has two yellow circles, which were extracted on the ultrasound machine. At the end, since these two sets were separated, so was the networks. So were the networks, sorry. And the unit model achieved F1 score of 0.91 and 0.93 for black and white and colored images respectively, while SegNet achieved 0.92 and 0.94. While scores are not that different, SegNet has achieved slightly better results here. So, which is the result of the fact that UNet has twice as much training parameters than compared to SegNet, which allowed it to train the data set more easily. On this figure 5, I don't know why it's 5, it should be 3, shows the comparison of the original SegNet, original and SegNet segmented images, where it can be seen that the SegNet has very smooth edges, unlike original sets would have, unlike manually segmented images. In contrast to this, even though SegNet gave us better results, this is actually part of future. We already did other tests for the lumen detection and plaque characterizations, and since for the lumen detection and in plaque detection, UNet gave a lot better results than SegNet, we concluded that we would use actually UNet results, even though SegNet gave slightly better results compared to UNet. So to conclude, this study showed the use of deep learning methods for detection of carotid artery walls, and the task was achieved using both SegNet and UNet, even though SegNet achieved slightly better results. At the end, we came to conclusion to use UNet-based networks for future work, for lumen detection and plaque characterization. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anic. I will have one question. Did you consider maybe using transfer learning approach to achieve even better results?
No, we could actually try that, but we thought of just using UNet and SegNet in this case.
Okay, it will be, in my opinion, interesting to try to introduce maybe pre-trained segmentation model and then retrain it with the new data.
That could be easier, but we trained our models ourselves, so it was easier for us to use augmentation methods to raise the number of images than to use pre-trained method where we do not know how the difference between that set and the set that will be tested with our images, since they can be very different between the different countries.
Do anyone have another question, maybe? Okay, then we will proceed in the second presentation. Expert fuzzy system for estimating risk of hypertension. Author is Jovana Nikolic.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Jovana Nikolic, and I come from Faculty of Engineering, University of Kragujevac, and I will share now my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. This article presents the procedure for designing an expert system for predicting the risk of hypertension. The level of application of expert system in the fields of medicine is continuously growing all over the world. Diagnosis of the disease is of special importance because nowadays timely detection of the presence of the disease is very important in the treatment of the patient. Medical researchers and doctors cannot precisely define how disease prevents the normal functioning of the body. Developed countries, but also developing countries, face various forms of health crisis, which in addition to many diseases includes hypertension, a disease that threatens the lives of millions of people. Hypertension may be caused by different factors and be so unpredictable, which is why doctors often make decisions based on intuitions and experiences. Expert system is an intelligent computer program that uses knowledge and reasoning procedures in the process of solving problems that require a high degree of experience in the domain that the expert system deals with. Implementation and construction process of the expert systems include a set of methods, rules, and procedures such as collection, presentation, and the memorization of knowledge, but also the use of human resources to solve a complex problem situation. The results process is a set of rules that generate quality and accurate data output that solves a problem in the way that an expert person does. Fuzzy logic is a method that renders precise what is imprecise in the world of medicine using a natural language. Inputs and outputs have different linguistic names and their values, and the transformation of such an expression into the form of a mathematical representation is made possible by the theory of fuzzy sets. Within the given expert system, inputs are important for diagnosing the risk of hypertension, and their possible values are used. This is a system design, and this article presents the procedure of design. This design has been divided into several steps. The steps are fuzzification, rule evaluation, and finally defuzzification. The heart of fuzzy logic expert system is the rule base, and the rule base consists a set of if-then rules of fuzzy. Fuzzification is the first step, and fuzzification is done by determining the linguistic variables and corresponding membership functions. I use the different membership functions like triangle, trapezoid membership functions. It will convert the input that is crisp into a fuzzy input. Then defuzzification is the operation of computing a crisp value given some membership function. It converts the fuzzy quantities into crisp quantities back. And the rule base consists of set of rules, if-then rules. Okay, this is my input data. In this system, the following are taken as variables, and that is age, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, heart rate, glucose, the degree of risk, body mass index, and cigarettes intake. The linguistic variable gender is input and has values male or female. It is estimated that the men get sick more often, while in women the risk increases after the age of 65. And for test examples, samples of people of all ages were considered, which are defined by belonging to one of the groups. A test example for one patient, and values of his parameters are presented on the next slide. Here we can use a graphical user interface and patient informations like age, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, heart rate, body mass index, glucose level, cigarettes intake, and genetic factors. And here we can see his estimated risk of hypertension. A test example for this patient and values of his parameters are presented. When a person gets a reading between 74% and 100%, he is confirmed to have a hypertension. The inputs that have been used are selected based on experiences from doctors and also based on scientific literatures. And the result will be more accurate because more inputs were used. Also, in this study, the final hypertension diagnosis results is shown on our developed graphical user interface by inserting the data and patient information, pressing the button, then the percentage of risk for getting hypertension will be shown. And by using this developed fuzzy expert system, the result can be known within few seconds and thus can save the diagnosis time. So the aspiration of artificial intelligence and thus of expert systems as a subfield of artificial intelligence is the development of a system capable of making a decision in the way as a human being. Thank you for your attention. Do you have some questions?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I will have one question. So you have shown the graphs of the fuzzy system overlaps on your presentation. Can you determine the influence using that data? So, for example, if you had another input, a new input, can you determine what is the influence of that input on the patient risk from hypertension?
If I understand, yes, we can use different information for a patient. If we enter personal information, patient data in this graphical user interface, we can get results for every patient and estimated risk of hypertension.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay, if that's the case, thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to invite the next presenter, which is Nicola Radwanovic, with his presentation on breast cancer classification.
Hello.
Hello. Do you need your presentation shared or you're mute? Just letting you know you are muted currently.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Nicola Radwanovic from Faculty of Engineering, University of Kragujevac, and my article is breast cancer classification. Sorry. Breast cancer is most frequently diagnosed life-threatening cancer in women, and it's the leading cause of death among women, along with lung cancer. The key for treatment and patient survival is the early detection of cancer, and methods like breast imaging, screening, and innovations in breast cancer therapy result in decline in mortality. Most commonly used techniques for breast imaging are mammograms, ultrasound, and MRI. Breast cancer classification is then conducted by doctors upon looking at the images and physical inspection. Today, machine learning algorithms can be used for early detection and precise classification of breast tumors. Okay, dataset is a Wisconsin breast cancer dataset, and it consists of samples with 30 numerical attributes. The values in dataset represents different metrics of tumors derived from microscopic images of tissue samples extracted by fine needle aspiration. Fine needle aspiration consists of a doctor taking a sample of a tissue using a hollow needle. Some attributes in the dataset are radius, texture, and smoothness of the cells. The samples are classified in two different classes, malign and benign. Related work, the authors achieved 97.5% accuracy using k nearest neighbors classifier and using the accuracy metric to compare classifiers. In some other work, authors presented 4 different classifiers for this problem: support vector machine, k nearest neighbors, naive Bayes, and C4.5, and compared them using accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score metrics. In these articles, 3 different classifiers are used, and they are random forest classifier, decision tree classifier, and k nearest neighbors classifiers. And the classifiers are evaluated and compared using different metrics like accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score. During training, cross-validation is implemented to reduce the possibility of overfitting and to evaluate the classifiers on validation dataset during training. Tenfold cross-validation is used, and it consists of dividing the training dataset into 10 equally or near equally sized subsets called folds, and in each epoch of training, 9 folds are used for training and 1 fold is used for validation. And in every epoch, a different fold is used for validation. Samples in dataset have many features, like I said, 30 features, and so the correlation analysis is performed to see which features are highly correlated, so we can perform a feature selection. Features are considered to be highly correlated if their correlation is above 90%. Only one feature from the group of highly correlated features is kept in the model, and the others are discarded or removed from the model. This is done to speed up the training and to reduce the confusion of the model by feeding it with some redundant information. The last technique for improvement that is implemented is hyperparameter optimization, because classifiers have many different hyperparameters which should be carefully selected to improve the metrics of the classifiers. This is done by using grid search for defining the optimal values of the hyperparameters. Grid search is done by testing the performances of the classifiers with different combinations of various hyperparameters. Parameters that are grid search are, for example, k value for the k nearest neighbors, so maximum depth and the number of estimators for random forest classifier. And here we can see the metrics of the classifiers after performing all these improvements, and we can see that for this problem, the best performance is by a random forest classifier, which has 99.41% accuracy on the that's the data set. But for all of these classifiers, these improvements have significantly improved the metrics. Okay, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please ask.
Okay, do anyone have a question? Okay, thank you, Mr. Radwanovic. Now we will proceed to the next article, medical data annotation and JSON to dataset conversion using LabelMe and Python. Authors Carlos Severinsky and Tajana Cvija.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, okay, so you hear me, okay. So can I upload the presentation myself, or, oh yeah, it should be.
You can share the screen or we
Yeah,
can,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. So can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Carlos Severinsky, and I want to introduce also my colleague Tajana, who worked on this paper with me. So what we wanted to do with this paper, we want to use medical data annotation and JSON to dataset conversion with LabelMe and Python. So basically what we've done in such an, in short, we wanted to use LabelMe for the annotation of radiological data. The annotation, we want to do the annotations of bladder and prostate and generate these JSON files from which we can later get the masks and what we need for uses in semantic segmentation and other forms of CNN as we could go to that. So data that we got was the radiological data of 235 frontal CT scans, 124 horizontal and 54 sagittal plane CT scans. And with these, some of these examples can be seen on the right. We got these from the clinical hospital center in Rijeka, but also we talked about getting them from Dicom images, from for what we'll maybe talk about more later, because that's the whole point of the second paper that we wrote. So what we've done with the annotation, we used the LabelMe software, so online and offline. It can be used offline or online, and we used the one that can be used with the Anaconda because it was convenient for us. So what we done with LabelMe, we used the images we got, we annotated the bladder and prostate, and generated these JSON files from which we later got our masks and pictures that we can use in the segmentation. So this is just the example of this annotation. So here you can see in the picture how we annotated the bladder and how we annotated the prostate. And with this, just this basic process of doing every single picture by itself, and we can get our custom data set. And from that data set, we were able to get the masks. Of course, when we got the .json files, we had to convert them to the images that we needed. So for that, we just chose to use Python, and we used just simple basic batch command and used the pre-made function LabelMe JSON to dataset. From this, we got some results. So on the furthest left picture, you can see that the original image of the CT scan, where we annotated the bladder and prostate. In the middle, you can see how the mask ended up being, and on the far right image, you can see how we got the how they correspond with each other. So how we got this prostate and bladder both on the same picture. So So what I wanted to do in the future work with this, we wanted to use the UNet semantic segmentation and other forms of CNN to analyze these masks and features in a sense. They wanted to get some end results, and these end results we hope to be later to determine the difference between these organs and use that in medical imaging as we can. So yeah, that's about that. So if anybody has any questions, I'll answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Severinsky. If there's any question. Okay, then we'll proceed to the next paper, multiple medical images extraction from Dicom and conversion to JPEG using Python. The authors are Tana Natsvia and Carla Severinsky.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, we can.
Okay, I'll just share screen, right? Okay, you can see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, my name is Tana Natsvia. You have already heard from my colleague Carla. And the topic of our second paper was multiple medical images extraction from Daikon and conversion to JPEG using Python. For those of you who are not familiar or just need a reminder, Dicom is the standard method for the transmission and storage of medical images and their associated information. It is also a file format which contains medical images, but much more useful information as well, such as patient's name, age, gender, condition, and so on. The thing is that we cannot open Dicom files with just any software. So, for example, if we wanted to see the image contained in the Dicom file on our PC, we wouldn't be able to do so if we don't own a special type of software. So our goal was to extract medical images from multiple Dicom files at once and convert them into the JPEG format by using Python. The data we used were the actual plain CT scans of lungs downloaded from the Cancer Imaging Archive. The files were already sorted into folders, which made it easier for us. Now the next step was to write the code that was going to do the extraction and conversion for us. First, we imported some libraries and packages that were needed. In the second section of the code that you can see, we defined a function that is a Dicom files listing function and applied it on the specified directory. The third part of the code is the definition of the Dicom to JPEG conversion function. The most important part of this function is actually rescaling the images because they need to be properly rescaled for the outputs to be of the satisfactory quality. And finally, after we've done that, we wrote a multiple files conversion loop, which converts files from Dicom format to JPEG format and saves them with the appropriate name in the folder. Here we picked 3 pictures that show the results of the conversion. As you can see, the outputs are of satisfactory quality. In the future, we could use this data with annotation tools and artificial intelligence to diagnose lung cancer or some other diseases, but for now, the only goal of our paper was actually to extract multiple images from Dicom and convert them to JPEG, which we've done, so our work here was done for now. And now I want to say thank you first to our assistant Ivan Lorenzin, who helped us with this paper. I want to thank all those who made this conference possible for us, and to all of you who are listening. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that colleagues Severinsky and Svia are fourth-year students, so first year of master's degree studies. So this work was a beginning of our cooperation in future months. So I just want to thank them that they joined our conference. So the next and the last.
Can I ask
yeah, please.
a few questions about Jpeg? So Jpeg has a lot of formats, and most of them are lossy. So the quantization in their algorithms are making the picture way worse than it was in the original, but in a sense that we don't make a distinction, is it worse or not. But when we try to learn the MLP algorithm or any kind of image recognition algorithm, it's based on the medical images. I think it's very important to discuss this precision of image converting to JPEG, because when in the beginning stage of cancer, I think like the losing some information in the picture will be critical to get a pre-diagnosis in the sense of recognition in the software. If you get what I mean.
That's a good comment. Thank you for that. But I just want to say that such a diagnostic procedure as CT is used to evaluate the spread of already diagnosed tumor of urinary bladder. So the first stages of the urinary bladder cancer cannot be detected by using CT scans, but they are detected using endoscopic procedure called cystoscopy. So for this application, the quality of JPEG images is way enough. So we don't need to have a larger or expensive method for this application.
Okay. Because I know there's like a type of JPEG format that is like lossless. I think LX JPEG or something like that.
Yes, of course, but as I already said, for this application, it's enough, because the starting first stage or second stage of urinary bladder cancer cannot be seen with a CT scan whatsoever, not automatically or now by specialists.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, can we proceed to the last paper in this section? Is brain tumor detection based on MRI images using a multi-layer Perceptron. Authors are Marko Mataja and Dorian Sablic-Nemec.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear and we can see the slideshow.
Great. First of all, greetings to all participants. I am Dorian Sablic-Nemec, and I will be presenting an article done by Marko Mataja and I. The subject of this article is brain tumor detection based on MRI images using multi-layer Perceptron. We approached this problem with implementation of scikit-learn's MLP classifier function and tuning of its main parameters and architecture. Dataset was sourced from Kaggle, and it had quite a few its flaws. It was a scarce selection of images sourced from unknown sources, and it had a low number of pictures. Firstly, we had to expand the dataset by artificially modifying the images. Secondly, the images were heavily processed with the Gaussian blur and threshold function in a later stage of the experiment. Here we can see the mentioned dataset expansion. Each image was rotated and mirrored in multiple combinations and then exported to a new dataset image. We can see the source dataset was 253 images, and the expansion resulted to over 2,000 images, which is great for training. These transformations were done by OpenCV's functions in Python, of course. Here we are at the first run of the first stage of the experiment, choosing the most suitable activation function. In this run, the tangent hyperbolic activation function performed better in regards of higher average testing score, which we can see average testing scores, which are derived from averaging the testing scores of each activation function. In the second run, it's clear that rectified linear unit, the ReLU function, performed the best. It had a result of 0.711 of testing score. In the second stage, point was architecture tuning and choosing the most suitable solver in regards of higher testing score as in last run. In this run of experiments, activation function is ReLU in every instance. First, we ran a neural network with the 2 hidden layers, 400 neurons in the first layer, 200 in the later, after which we ran the 3-layer neural network with 200 neurons in each. Solvers performed differently in each architecture, but the differences between architectures were ever so slight if the optimal solver was chosen for each architecture. So based on the overall highest average score, Adam's solver with initial learning rate of 0.001 was used in further experiments. Here we can see the previously mentioned image processing techniques of Gaussian blur and threshold function. Gaussian blur partly solves the noise issues of the MRI images, but I say partly because noise reduction in MRI images is a subject of study of itself. There are many complex techniques. We use the most simple one, just blurring the image, and it resulted okay, but there can be done many improvements. And the threshold function isolates the highlighted part of the image based on the luminescence we set. So we can see the most white part gets isolated, and we have to adjust the threshold value. So we grab only the supposed tumor part, and the rest of the image becomes black. These are the results after feeding the process dataset to the previously optimized MLP network, and it resulted in a score of 78.66% accuracy. We could say not great, not terrible, it's probably good enough. But also we noticed many faults in the dataset from the source. It had a few images that were classified as positive and negative, so it messed up the training. After we removed these images, we trained the model again and reran the experiment. After rerunning the classification, the score was 95%, which we could say it's great, but there was a slight reduction in the dataset because of removing the fault images. In conclusion, the training dataset quality and image processing plays a major role in classification accuracy. Not only the optimizations, but the source dataset is the key thing, it seems here. And that would be it. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sablic-Nemec. Do anyone have any question, maybe?
Hello from Serbia. Tijana here. I just want to express how great all your papers are and how much work you have put into this, and I'm really looking forward in future to seeing all your papers getting improved. I just have one short question, since you mentioned that you had some disbalance and some accuracy that wasn't, let's say, perfect. Do you have an idea how would you improve the accuracy, and how would you improve the results in the future?
Yes, well, the key thing is having a great data set. And we used one publicly available from Kaggle. It was sourced from God knows where. It was not, let's say, from a medical institute. If the data set was sourced from, let's say, some medical college, and it was much larger, let's say 5 to 10,000 images, the results would be much better in every instance and optimization. So I think that's the key thing. Also, the image processing of noise reduction, threshold isolation of features and such stuff.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I just want to emphasize the fact that all these papers in this section were student papers. So Mr. Sablic Nemec has performed this research in our application of artificial intelligence course. So that was his course thesis. So he will get an A, obviously. So I'm glad to have such a good students that have a courage enough to have courage to come on such conference. Okay, that will be it for now. If anyone have a question regarding all section, maybe, or something. Okay, then I will close this section. As I said already, this section was dedicated to AI application of medical applications of AI. So in the next section we will have another theme. It will be like mechanical engineering, more themes. So I'll give my section head position to colleague Dr. Nicola Angelic. Okay, the section 2 begins in 1400 hours. So until then, we will have a quality break of 1 hour. See you then.
I would just like to point out, so we will leave this call open in case you want to communicate. I will have to apologize for the fact that we weren't capable of holding this conference in real life, so to speak, this year, but I will leave this.
Da, ispričavam se.
We will. So we will leave this call open, so you can talk to each other if you have questions to ask, and for the students that are present, maybe our students that are present at the faculty, we can actually have a coffee break in front, so we invite you to come in front, and the other people joining us are welcome to stay here and chat until 2 o'clock, right? Okay, thank you very much.
It's interesting that our presentation were a little bit faster, so we have time for virtual coffee break in 1 hour, so everyone can make himself a coffee on the coffee machine or something. Okay, see you in 1 hour.
See you.
Welcome everyone to section number 2. My name is Nicola and I will be a moderator of this section. In this section, the papers that will be presented are in the field of mechanical engineering and implementation of artificial intelligence methods in mechanical engineering. The first paper, the name of the first paper is CO2 emissions calculation from steam generator during combustion of different fuel types, that will be presented by Daniel Marjanovic and Vedran Mrzljak. So would you please start your presentation?
Hello, is the presentation visible?
Yes.
Okay. I am Daniel Marjanovic. Hello to everybody, and I'm going to present our results and the calculation of carbon dioxide emissions. So in this paper, we presented the results of carbon dioxide emissions calculation from a ship's steam generator, shown on this slide, during the usage of 18 different fuel types for its 23 given loads of the generator. During the generator's standard operation, it uses the combined fuel source of heavy fuel oil and the natural gas, and the data from which the emissions calculation were done are based on those types of fuel. The fuel consumption was given for all the different loads, and the lower heating value of fuels are known. That gave way for the calculation of the heat generated from the steam generator, which then enabled the calculation of the fuel consumption of different fuels needed to have the same amount of heat generated. That data is then used for the calculation of carbon dioxide emissions for 18 different fuel types, as before mentioned, for comparison and for all the loads of the generator. The equation for the calculation of carbon dioxide emissions is derived from the chemical reaction of combustion of elemental carbon, so it was necessary also to know the carbon mass fraction in the different fuel types. In this picture, the amount of generated heat from the steam generator is shown, and the respective fuel consumptions of heavy fuel oil and natural gas in the generator's standard operating mode for the given loads of the generator is also visible on the graph. It can be noted that the increase of the generated heat is provided with the increase of natural gas usage mostly. In this picture, it's shown that the carbon dioxide emissions for the combined usage of heavy fuel oil and natural gas, as is the standard operating mode for the generator, and the emissions are presented in kilograms per hour and vary from around 3,000 to a bit above 11,000 kilograms per hour, depending on the different load capacities of the steam generator. The fuel types compared were the combined usage of heavy fuel oil and natural gas and their respective separate usage, 10 different types of lignite or brown coal, 4 different types of anthracite or hard coal, and barkwood. The data for the 10 lignite types and 4 anthracite types were averaged, considering they differed slightly in the calculation depending from where the coal types are extracted. And finally, here we can see the comparison of different fuel types, carbon dioxide emissions during different loads of the generator. Still, the amount of heat generated is the same for each fuel type, which allows for a realistic comparison. It's visible that the largest emissions are from the usage of coal, spending from around 5,000 kilograms per hour to around 24,000 kilograms per hour, being roughly a double of the ones that from natural gas consumption, which are the lowest in the range. Also, it's visible that the difference of the carbon dioxide emissions between the combined usage of heavy fuel oil and natural gas and the sole usage of natural gas isn't large, which is understandable considering that during bigger load capacities, natural gas consumption is increased and heavy fuel oil usage doesn't change notably. Finally, in this paper, the presented calculations confirm the advantages of proper fuel choice for the marine steam generator with the aim to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. In many cases, the price of fuel is the main reason why newer and cleaner approaches are not taken into consideration. With more rigorous regulations regarding emissions, the choice of less polluting fuels becomes a necessity. In the marine environment, analysis performed in this paper shows the dominance of natural gas in regards to carbon dioxide emissions when compared to all the others observed fuels. At any steam generator load, carbon dioxide emissions of natural gas are notably lower than emissions of any other analyzed fuels. In future works, it's possible to consider different methods of fuel production and extraction, and therefore the emissions produced during the whole operation lifecycle. Also, the usage of alternative fuels and renewable energy sources can be an interesting way for the reduction of all emissions, not only carbon dioxide emissions. Also, the application of contemporary numerical methods can bring many benefits in fuel production and other energy systems, such as fuel consumption reduction and overall process efficiency, which are directly related to CO2 emissions. And that would be it from me. Thank you for your time. Do we have any questions, maybe?
I have one question. Could you please tell us with which fuel and at which load the CO2 emissions are the highest?
Well, the highest CO2 emissions are for lignite coal, and of course, at the biggest loads of around 72%, which is presented, the CO2 emissions are the highest, around 24,000 kilograms per hour.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. The next paper is entitled Energy and Exergy Analysis of Nuclear Power Plant, that will be presented by Davor Poljancic and Vedran Mrzljak. Could you please start your presentation?
Just a second.
Okay.
Is the presentation visible?
Yes, yes.
All right. Hello and good day to all. My name is Davor Poljancic, and I'm a student at the Faculty of Engineering, University of Rijeka. Today I will tell you more about our article titled Energy and Exergy Analysis of a Nuclear Power Plant. This article was made in cooperation with Professor Vedran Mrzljak. Firstly, I would like to explain the title to you for better understanding of the topic. We calculated two types of efficiency. Energy efficiency is independent of ambient conditions, while exergy efficiency is heavily influenced by ambient conditions. And a nuclear power plant is a facility whose primary function is to generate electric energy from the energy contained in the nuclear fuel. Now I would like to tell you more about the process in the plant. An immense amount of energy is generated in the reactor, and the energy is used to generate steam, which is then used to generate useful work in the turbines. The steam expands in the high pressure turbine, and the moisture is separated after the high pressure turbine. The steam is then reheated, and it expands again in the low pressure turbine, after which it condenses in the condenser. A portion of the steam is separated from the turbines at a certain pressure points, and it is used for heating the condensate in a series of heat exchangers, 2 high pressure ones and 4 low pressure heat exchangers. Between them is a deaerator, whose primary function is to remove oxygen and other dissolved gases in the condensate, and the cooler. Using pumps, the condensate is brought back to the steam generator and the process can start again. Calculations were made with certain formulas for efficiency. Entry data was given in form of pressure, temperature, mass flow rate, and specific enthalpy for every state of the fluid, before and after a component. The mass flow rate before and after each control volume must be the same, assuming no leakage throughout the control volume, as can be seen in the first formula. The second formula is the energy balance, while the third formula is the energy of any fluid, which is equal to mass flow rate multiplied by specific enthalpy. The fourth formula is the overall formula for energy efficiency. The fifth formula is the Exergy balance, while the specific exergy is shown by the sixth formula, where H0, T0, and S0 are specific enthalpy, temperature, and specific entropy of the ambient. The exergy of any fluid is shown by the eighth formula, while the ninth formula shows the overall formula for exergy efficiency. There were some exceptions where variations of formulas for efficiency were used. Since it was unknown how much energy is produced in the reactor, energy efficiency of the steam generator was assumed to be 90%, so the generated heat could be calculated. Pictures on this slide show turbine cylinders of the high-pressure turbine with its entropy-enthalpy expansion points. Turbine energy efficiency was calculated using real or polytropic and ideal or isentropic expansion points and steam extractions at a certain pressure point. On the next slide, you can see a similar picture only for the low pressure turbine. Both turbines have two cylinders, so one dual flow cylinder, so the steam that enters the turbine is separated into two equal flows. Exergy analysis requires only real or polytropic expansion process. Now for the results of our calculations, the turbine calculations results for turbine calculations are shown on these pictures. The left picture shows ideal and real turbine powers for every turbine cylinder and for the whole high pressure turbine and the low pressure turbine, with its energy and exergy losses. Ideal power is the sum of real power and of energy losses. Both turbines generate around 900 megawatts of useful energy. The picture on the right shows energy and exergy efficiencies for every turbine cylinder and for the whole high pressure turbine and low pressure turbine. The energy efficiency of the whole high pressure turbine is equal to 71.1%, while the exergy efficiency is 84.45%. The whole low pressure turbine has an energy efficiency of 71.9%, while the exergy efficiency of 61.8%. The whole power plant has a total of 6 pumps. Energy efficiencies for pumps were assumed from 75% to 95%, with a 5% step in between for the pump use power calculation. The diagram shows how exergy efficiency for different pumps is changing with different energy efficiencies. Pump 5 had the highest calculated power with different energy efficiencies around 20 megawatts, while Pump 3 had the lowest power around 90 kilowatts. Also, the same pumps had the highest and lowest energy losses. Pump 2 had the lowest energy efficiency around 40%, and Pump 1 had the highest exergy efficiency around 85%. Now for the heat exchangers. Heat exchangers are used for heating the water from the condensate up to the steam generator. HP1, or the first high pressure heat exchanger, has an energy efficiency of almost 100%, so there are no energy losses. Other heat exchangers have energy efficiencies from 84 to 97%. Exergy efficiency varies from 60 to 90%. Now for the other components in the plant. Another important component in the power plant is the condenser. The condenser has a relatively high energy efficiency of 94%, but its energy losses are very high and equal to 128.76 megawatts, which is normal for this component. Its exergy efficiency is equal to 78%, and its exergy losses are around 22 megawatts. Deaerator, reheater, moisture separator, and steam generator are components whose energy efficiency is almost 100%, so the energy losses are minimal, while exergy efficiency varies from 78% to 98% for the specified components. generated heat in the reactor is equal to 335.73 megawatts, while the cumulative power of the turbines is 874.27 megawatts. The overall formula for energy efficiency is equal to produced mechanical power over generated heat, which gives the energy efficiency of the whole process of 26.2%, while exergy efficiency is equal to 27.9%. The formula for exergy efficiency of the process is similar, but the generated heat is multiplied by 0.94. Energy losses of the whole plant are equal to 2461.46 megawatts, while exergy losses of the whole plant are 2261.32 megawatts. And in conclusion, people are often scared of nuclear energy because of the past catastrophic events around the globe and because of the nuclear waste. But nuclear power plants produce zero emissions, unlike thermal power plants and carbon-based fuels. Global warming is one of the greatest problems of modern-day humanity, so we need a transition from carbon-based fueled power plants. I'm not saying it has to be nuclear power, but it does not have to be feared as much. Future work regarding this topic will be based on improving the plant efficiency and minimizing plant losses, and components with lowest efficiencies could be improved or replaced. That would be all from me. I would like to thank you for your attention and for your time. I would like to thank Professor Vedran Mrzljak for all of his help and guidance with this article, and I would also like to thank the whole ReSTEM team for giving me this opportunity to learn something new and useful. Thank you again, and is there any questions?
I have one question for you. You mentioned that energy and exergy efficiencies of entire power plant is around 26 or 27%. Yes. The question is, could this energy and efficiency of the entire power plant somehow could be improved?
Yes, of course. That is the whole idea of this work. The energy and exergy efficiencies are in normal limits, but it could be improved with removing or replacing some components or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. The next paper entitled Comparison of Open and Closed Gas Turbine Cycles will be presented by Dominic Salma and Vedran Mrzljak. Could you please start your presentation?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to share content. Is my presentation visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Dear colleagues, I hope you're having a good day. My name is Dominic Salma, and in this presentation, I will make a comparison between open and closed gas cycles. Before I start, I would like to thank my mentor, Vedran Mrzljak, for the guidance he has given me while writing this article and presentation. As you can see, figure 1 shows the scheme of the open cycle gas turbine process. Intake of the working medium happens in the first point of this process, and in this case, it is the air from the atmosphere. Between first and second point happens the compression of the air. After the compression, between point 2 and 3 happens mixing of air with gas and their combustion in the combustion chamber. Between point 3 and 4 occurs expansion of the flue gas, and finally in point 4 of the process the gas is disposed into the atmosphere. To make a closed cycle gas turbine, after calculation of the open cycle process, the same plant needs to be upgraded. This closed system works on a similar principle as the open one, but the main difference is the addition of the heater instead of combustion chamber, in which the working medium is heated by heat supplied from the outside. Also, instead of being released into the environment, working medium is cooled through a cooler. This enables the presence of the same working medium through a closed process of structure. Previous two figures showed ideal processes. Now we add two more points with apostrophe to make it a real process. like shown in TS diagram in figure 3. Then, in table 1, for real open cycle process, it is shown that the temperature, pressure, and middle specific heat have a rise in value up until operating point 3, with only exception being the pressure drop in point 3. Then, in point 4, value drops below point 3, but is still of a higher value than point 2 with an apostrophe. Table 2 shows real closed cycle process with different working mediums, which consist of helium, carbon dioxide, neon, argon, and nitrogen for analysis. The trend is similar again. Temperature, pressure, and enthalpy have a rise until point 3. Again, the exception is pressure drop in point 3, while entropy has a constant rise in value through all operating points. Next 3 slides will be on comparison between all 6 working mediums that I just mentioned, but also with air. In figure 4, power that is required to drive the turbo compressor was first compared with total power developed by the turbine. Working medium that had the lowest required driving turbo compressor power was air, while the highest turbo compressor power was achieved by neon. Respectively, working medium that had the lowest total power developed by the turbine was also air, while the highest turbine total power was achieved by neon. Next comparison, as shown in figure 5, is between the share of useful power in the total turbine power and the turbo compressor power share in total power. Working medium that had the lowest share of useful power in the total turbine power was neon, while the highest share of useful power in the total turbine power was achieved by air. Respectively, working medium that had the lowest turbo compressor power share in the total power was also air, while the highest turbo compressor power share in the total power was neon. This comparison shows that the total share for each observed turbine is the sum of both mentioned powers, which sum must always be equal to 100%. Third comparison is between the heat supplied to the heater and heat that is dissipated to the cooler. The air had the lowest supplied heat, while the carbon dioxide had the highest value of supplied heat. Lowest dissipated heat again belongs to air, while the highest belongs to carbon dioxide, as shown in figure 6. The fourth comparison shows the relationship between specific turbo compressor power and specific turbine power. The lowest specific turbo compressor power can be seen for argon, while the highest can be seen for helium. Carbon dioxide has the lowest specific turbine power, while helium has the highest specific turbine power, as shown in figure 7. Fifth comparison shows the thermodynamic efficiency of the whole process, which shows the relationship between the obtained useful power and the thermal energy invested in the system. Working medium, carbon dioxide, had the lowest process efficiency, while the air had the highest process efficiency of all observed working mediums, as shown in figure 8. Final comparison represents the mass flow of working medium in each observed process. Helium had the lowest mass flow of all 6 working mediums, while argon had the highest value of mass flow, as shown in figure 9. To conclude this presentation, for the real open cycle process, heat is supplied to the combustion chamber while being dissipated into environment. Likewise, if we upgrade the system, it becomes real closed cycle process, which has heat supplied to the heater from the outside while being dissipated in the cooler. Presence of the working medium is constant through the process without being thrown out. Also, this closed process achieves significantly high reliability of the turbine and extends its lifespan because the working medium does not contain substances that could cause corrosion or erosion on the parts of the turbine. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope you understood it well, and thank you all for your attention. Is there any questions?
Thank you for your interesting presentation. I had some questions during before you start presenting because I read your paper a couple of hours ago. So I don't now that you explained or answered all my questions during the presentation. I don't have any question for you, so thank you very much.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Okay, so the next paper entitled Efficiencies and Losses Comparison of Various Turbofan Engines for Aircraft Propulsion will be presented by Lovro Kadi and Vedran Mrzljak. Could you please share your presentation?
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Lovro Kadi and I will give you a short presentation about the paper which was written by Professor Vedran Mrzljak and I. The topic of this paper is Efficiencies and Losses Comparison of Various Turbofan Engines for Aircraft Propulsion. First, let me introduce you to the 5 turbofan engines that were examined in this research. The schemes of these engines are shown here on figures 1 to 5. Each engine generally consists of the following components: fan, low pressure compressor, high pressure compressor, combustion chamber, high pressure turbine, and low pressure turbine. Engine 2 is the only exception, as it is also fitted with an afterburner. Figure 6 shows inlet air properties such as air temperature and mass flow rate for each of the engines, as well as their fuel economy. We can see that engine 1 had the highest inlet air temperature and used the most fuel, while engine 3 had the lowest inlet air temperature. It can also be seen that engine 4 was using the least fuel. It should also be mentioned that each of the engines used kerosene as fuel since they are aircraft engines. Operating parameters such as pressure, temperature, and mass flow rates for each of the engine components were found in the literature, which is listed in the paper reference. Specific entropy, enthalpy, and exergy were calculated later using the NIST RevProp software. Okay, now let's talk about energy losses and efficiencies. Firstly, each of the engine components was analyzed separately. Energy losses results are shown here in figure 7. The fan with the biggest energy loss can be found in engine 2, while the fan with the smallest energy loss can be found in engine 5. Let's move on to low pressure compressors. The one with the biggest energy loss can be found in engine 2, while the one in engine 1 had the smallest energy loss. You can see the values in kilowatts here on the figure. High pressure compressor with the biggest energy loss was in engine 1, while engine 4 had high pressure compressor with the smallest energy loss. Combustion chambers, the one with the biggest energy loss was in engine 5, while the one with the smallest energy loss was in engine 3. High pressure turbine with the biggest energy loss was in engine 1, while the one with the smallest energy loss was found in engine 5. Low pressure turbine with the biggest energy loss was in engine 1, while the one with the smallest energy loss was also in engine 5. On figure 8, you can see energy efficiency results of specific engine components. So let's start with the fan. The most energy efficient fan was in engine 1, while the least energy efficient fan was in engine 2. The most energy efficient low pressure compressor was in engine 5, while the least energy efficient low pressure compressor was in engine 1. The most energy efficient high pressure compressor could be found in engine 3, while at the same time the least energy efficient low pressure compressor could be found in engine 4. Let's move on to combustion chambers. The most energy efficient one was in engine 3, while the least energy efficient one was in engine 5. The most energy efficient high pressure turbine could be found in engine 5, while the least energy efficient high pressure turbine could be found in engine 4. The most energy efficient low pressure turbine was in engine 5, while the least energy efficient low pressure turbine was found in engine 1. Now we are done in energy analysis. We are moving on to exergy analysis of engine components, for which the results are shown here on figures 9 and 10. The fan with the biggest exergy loss was in engine 2, while the fan with the smallest exergy loss was in engine 5. Low pressure compressor with the biggest exergy loss could be found in engine 2, while the one in engine 1 had the smallest exergy loss. High pressure compressor with the biggest exergy loss was in engine 1, while engine 4 had high pressure compressor with the smallest exergy loss. Combustion chamber with the biggest exergy loss was in engine 5, while the one with the smallest exergy loss was found in engine 3. High pressure turbine, which had the biggest exergy loss, was in engine 1, while the one with the smallest exergy loss was in engine 5. As for the low pressure turbine, the one with the biggest exergy loss could be found in engine 1, while the one with the smallest exergy loss was in engine 5. Okay, now let's discuss exergy efficiencies of engine components. They are shown here on the right on figure 10. The most exergy efficient fan was found in engine 1, while the least exergy efficient fan was found in engine 2. You can see the values here on the figure. The most exergy efficient low pressure compressor was found in engine 5, while the least exergy efficient low pressure compressor was found in engine 1. The most exergy efficient high pressure compressor was in engine 3, while the least exergy efficient low pressure compressor was found in engine 4. The most exergy efficient combustion chamber was in engine 3, while the least exergy efficient combustion chamber was in engine 5. High pressure turbine with the highest exergy efficiency was found in engine 5, while the least exergy efficient one was found in engine 4. The most exergy efficient low pressure turbine was in engine 5, while the least exergy efficient low pressure turbine was found in engine 1. Now, all that is left to do is to discuss whole engine energy and exergy losses and efficiencies. As you can see on the figure 11, engine 2 lost the most energy of approximately 162 megawatts, while engine 3 lost only 5,000 kilowatts of energy. Engine 2 also had the biggest exergy loss of 245 megawatts, while engine 3 lost only 29,000 kilowatts of exergy. Since engine 2 has an afterburner, these results were expected. As for the whole engine energy and exergy efficiencies, on the last figure you can see that engine 1 had the highest energy and exergy efficiency of 97.76% and 54.57% respectively. On the other hand, engine 5 performed with the worst energy and exergy efficiencies of only 37.38% and 10.38% respectively. So to conclude, this research has shown us only which of the turbofan engine components could be improved in the future, but of course more detailed internal analysis of specific components would then be necessary. The methods used here relied only on measured characteristics of the gases, but they didn't examine the internal design of each of the components, so we can't speculate about that any further. Thank you for your attention, and if anyone has any questions, you can ask me now.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I have one question for you. You mentioned in your paper that the energy and exergy loss of the combustion chamber was the highest in all analyzed engines. Could this energy and exergy loss be improved in some way or reduced?
This shows us which of the engines had the worst and the best efficiencies, so of course it could be improved, but for that, as I said before, it would be necessary to analyze specific combustion chambers more precisely internally, so then it would be possible to make these changes.
Okay, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. The next paper entitled Prediction of Surface Roughness with Genetic Programming will be presented by Matko Gluchina and Amar Muminovic. So could you please share your presentation?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matko Gluchina, and my colleague Amar Muminovic and I will be presenting a project titled Prediction of Surface Roughness with Genetic Programming. Firstly, the problem needs to be presented. This presentation is describing the problems and solutions to prediction surface roughness using the artificial intelligence and genetic programming. Normally, there are several methods that students use to predict the possibility of depleting surface roughness, but for this research purpose, we will use genetic programming and symbolic regression. Methodology and results are presented in the further slides. First, we will start with a short introduction. Each surface has its roughness, but what affects the roughness of that surface? Milling, vibrations, irregularities, machine tools itself, etc. can affect surface roughness itself. On this slide, dataset is presented. For our research, we had 2 datasets saved in 2 Excel documents. For purpose of this research, they were combined into one file, which now consists of 54 values for each category, such as feed rate, depth of cut, cutting speed, and surface roughness. Genetic programming needs an input and outputs. X represents the input values, which contains values such as depth of cut, cutting speed, and feed rate, and Y includes the values such as surface roughness. The given dataset is split into training and testing values. Those parameters are randomly selected in ratio of 80-20 ratio, which means 80% of dataset is used as training parameters and 20% of values in datasets are used as testing parameters for regression. Methodology is presented on current slide. On figure 1, it is visible that what the symbolic regression means, how it looks. Symbolic regression generates mathematical expression and is formed in the shape of tree, like we can see on the figure 1. Main parameters are listed on this slide. They are also called hyperparameters. Hyperparameters are reproduction, crossover, mutation. A brief description is shown on this slide, but for this purpose of this presentation, we won't be explaining each one. Specific values that are used for this research are listed in table 2. Some of them are fixed values that we can call default values. For this research, we are using population of 10,000 and change generation for 3 different cases. First one is population of 10,000 and generation of 10. Second is 10,000 and generation 100. And third one, we use 10,000 population and 1,000 generations. But how can we know that our regression is approximately good? In this case, we can use an evaluation method named R-square, which equation shape is shown in expression 1. What is the meaning of this expression? Well, its results are between 0 and 1. We put the values such as y and y like unit vector, which represents number of samples, and m represents the length of vector. Now, there are results and discussion. As mentioned earlier, we made 3 runs in Python simulation. First run is shown on this slide with a population of 10,000 and generation of 10. Here we got results listed. R-square is minus 0.2183. What is the meaning of it? It is the meaning that our regression is not even inside the given dataset, which can be seen in figure 2. The circles represent the tested values of our research, and axis presents the predicted values. Colors shown of the values of each results that is tested and predicted. As we can see in figure 2, none of these values are in the same color. If they were the same color, that would mean that the predicted and tested values have scored correct result. By that, I mean that they have the same value, but in this case, they don't. Okay, let's move to the next run of simulation. In this case, we use 100 possible generations. The result of R-square is minus 1.5342, which means that we got even worse result than last time. We can see that because of the bigger difference in colors in figure 3. In this case, we use a number on 1000 possible generations, and we got R² value of 0.6926, which means that we got even worse result than even the last 2 cases. We can also see in colors like in figure 4. And now conclusion. Symbolic regression can be good, a method for analysis for mathematical equations and expressions for finding models that best fits the given dataset. But in this case, symbolic regression is not a good option for approximating the values of surface roughness. What are the possible reasons? Possible reasons may be due to the lack of the given dataset, and it is recommended to have a larger dataset to improve regression equation. There are methods which can be used for enlarging the dataset if it's necessary. Also, a reason for that includes more precise measurements and better combinations of variables in genetic programming algorithm. And this is the end of our presentation. If you have any question, feel free to ask me or my colleague Amar Mominovic, and thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions for you. The first one, could you please tell us how large was the data set used in this analysis?
We had 45 values of each category. Like I mentioned before, we had 45 of feed rate, depth of cut, and surface roughness.
Okay, and so this is a very small data set.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so for the better result, you would need to enlarge this data set somehow. Okay, the second question or comment was you used the GP and you given parameters in table, I don't know the number of the table, the hyperparameters that you used in genetic programming algorithm, and there you mentioned that you had only 3 runs with the GP. I think that no, it was slide 7 or 8, I think. Yes, here you only execute the GP algorithm 3 times. The better procedure would be that you define the hyperparameters in certain range, define a function, and which randomly chooses the hyperparameters. So you need to make more than 3 executions of GP algorithm. In my investigations, I used sometimes between 50 or 100 or 500 executions of GP algorithm in order to find symbolic expression for estimation of something. So I think that 3 runs is 3 executions of GP algorithm is too small.
Yeah, but the problem is the time of simulation of execution.
You could shorten the time of execution of GP algorithm by defining the smaller number of population members, then prolonging the number of generations, and modifying the range of crossover and mutation coefficients. In general, I would like to suggest that in further investigations using GP, you modify these parameters, put them in certain specific range, and run them more than 100 or 200 times.
Okay, I will for next investigation and experimentation. Thank you for the advice.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. The next paper, entitled Prediction of Tool Wear After Machining, will be presented by Filip Shahini and Nicola Grguric. Could you please present your paper?
Good afternoon. Just a second, please. Okay, good afternoon again. Nicola and me did research and an article based on prediction of tool wear after machining using genetic programming, just like the presentation before. Here you can see what are the main topics we are going to discuss and talk about. Prediction of tool wear after machining is a very important part of the diagnostic process, used to find relevant time to change the machine tool, what results in higher quality products and lower cost of machining process. To get you in our topic, we're going to talk a little bit about the data set. We have gotten two predefined data sets which were consisted of 6 columns: experiment number, depth of cut, cutting speed, feed rate, and tool wear and surface roughness. Also, the method we have used is genetic programming algorithm. We have used it in order to regress and predict values of tool wear. Also, to show the accuracy of regression, we have evaluated R squared and RMSA metrics. To add, we have used a decision tree regressor and a random forest regressor algorithm in order to confirm or refute the results of genetic programming. To start with our methodology, dataset preparation was the first issue. A received dataset was in XLX format. Using Microsoft Excel, dataset was converted to a CSV format, which is more suitable for analysis. In order to read data from CSV datasets, we used the Pandas library. Also, dataset had 2 extra columns, experiment number and surface roughness. Just a little digression. We had the same dataset as the colleagues Matko and Amar before, but we needed to reject the columns which were not necessary for our experiment, which was experiment number and surface roughness. Also, we had classified data into individual variables. We have used variable X for input parameters and Y for output parameters. What was next needed was the separation of data for training. We have used 80% as data as training data and 20% data as test data. Also, we were supposed to merge these 2 datasets into one. After the dataset preparation, using the Python library gplearn, genetic method was applied to the dataset in order to get the results. Genetic programming is an evolutionary approach that extends genetic algorithms to allow the exploration of the space of the computer programs. Genetic programming works by defining a goal in the form of a quality criterion or fitness, and then using this criterion to evolve a set of candidate solutions by mimicking the basic principles of Darwinian evolution. On the figure 1, we can see just a simplified genetic programming algorithm flowchart. The main parameters which we were adjusted using for implementation of LGP genetic programming were the population size, number of generations, and probability of crossover. I have tested. We have tested the other parameters, but they didn't have. They didn't make any difference to the results. So we have concluded that the generation number is the most important parameters where we got a better result. On the figure 2, we can see the output of the genetic programming in Python console, which displays the best individual and population averages, length and fitness. Also, we have used the decision tree regressor and random forest regressor method to confirm or refute the results of genetic programming. and compare results of predicted values and metrics. To sum up, metric results have been plotted on 2D plot, while test and predicted values of the GP for the biggest number of generations have been plotted on 3D scatter plot. Each data set was trained individually, and at last we have merged both datasets into one, the GP on them. Nicola, you can continue with the results, please.
Hi, do you hear me? I will say something about results. First dataset used was dataset A. So as seen on figure 3, R2 and RMSI metrics do not depend on the number of generations. Best metrics evaluation were using 10 generations. By looking in the table 1, where GP is compared to other methods, GP has the best metric evaluation. Also, GP has been the most successful of tool error prediction. Tests and predicted values are shown on figure 5. As seen, no large color difference can be seen indicating test and predicted values of GP could be considered as good. Predicted values for each used methods can be seen on this slide. In case of dataset B, a moment, okay, R2 value had the best scoring using 100 generations. By looking into table 1, where GP is compared to other methods, GP has the best metric evaluation. Also, figure 8 shows tests and predicted values, where it can be seen values are quite good predicted. In case of merged datasets, A plus B, R2 had negative values indicating regression was not successful. To add, decision tree and random forest regressor also has negative values. The R2 metrics has irregular values and don't depending on number of generations. Next slide, okay. As it can be seen on figure 11 and the numerical values of predicted toolware, most of the data compared to true values have no sense values. To conclude with, in the case of dataset A and B, GP algorithm was successful, which can be proven with good metric evaluations and quite correct predicted values. In case of merged dataset, it can be concluded that the merged dataset was badly defined and genetic programming, not other used methods, could not be applied successfully. Also, predicted values of the toolware cannot be taken as correct. In addition, when training single dataset, it can be assumed that the symbolic regressors do not depend on the number of generations. The best metric and predictions were not in the largest generation size while training on dataset A. And that's it. Thank you for attention.
Are there any questions from the audience? No. Okay, I have one question for you. How large was the dataset A and how large was the dataset B?
They both had 27 rows.
So this is very small.
Very small dataset. Also, the values were quite misleading because dataset A and B had big differences in minimum and maximum values.
Okay.
So they were maybe not too compatible each other.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The final paper that will be presented in this section is entitled Steel Plate Faults Classification Using NLP Classifier. And this paper will be presented by Lea Mrakovčić and Zvonimir Župčić. Now, could you please present your paper?
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Colleague Lea Mrakovčić and I, we had a task to classify steel plate faults using MLP classifier. From Kaggle, we were given a database in CSV file. The matrix size was 1941. So that's the number of rows, number of observations, and it was 34 columns. Out of those 34 was 27 inputs or features, and they are shown here on the correlation map or the heat map.
I have to stop it because we don't see the correlation map. We see only the first line.
I switched.
Okay, maybe it did something.
You probably shared the wrong screen or...
No, it's okay. No. Okay, you can start.
Do you see the second slide?
Yes.
All right. So this is the heat map, shows the correlation between -1 and 1. Input data is numerical, so some features ranged between hundreds and some were up to several 100,000. So we had to scale it down with this normalization formula to normalize it between the range of 0 and 1. Do you see the third slide, the feature histogram? It shows the distribution for each feature. So this.
Not yet. We don't see the third slide yet.
Can I try to share it maybe differently? I shared the window, but.
Okay. Now we can see the third slide.
Third slide.
Okay. Now we see the third
this
slide.
This is the histogram which shows the distribution for each feature, and those are 27 features, and the other 7 were the faults. The faults are outputs described in one hot matrix. That means it's a matrix full of zeros, except for the defect for certain classes, when it will show 1. It's unevenly distributed, with the class of other faults being over 1/3 of total observation, and stains and dirtiness 10 times less. So under 100 observations. Other faults are pastries such as stains, dirtiness, and bumps. We used MLP classifier to train the network from the scikit library in Python, and some of the important parameters is the number of hidden layers with their sizes, and activation functions, linear, tangents, hyperborello, which are different solvers as well, mostly SGD and Adam, and alpha and learning rate and batch sizes. We also try to switch it up, so maybe it can further improve or limit the performance. But before training, we split the data into 80 and 20% for train and test. We use the stratify, try to even it up a little bit, but it did not improve the results much. Test train split and grid search CV are under model selection library. So this grid search CV is used to automatically tune the parameters and choose the best one based on the accuracy. So after several thousands of fits, it was time consuming, and depending on the device maximum iteration number, but it's still time saving compared to manually testing each combination. So we tried some of the different hidden layer sizes with 2 hidden layers and 3 hidden layers, different solvers and activation functions, and most of them got the base accuracy to 70%. So we settled for this one MLP classifier with 3 hidden layer sizes, with 3 hidden layer sizes, 64, 32, and 16, and those values shown here. And other than base accuracy, task was to rate it with F1 and AUC scores, those accuracy metrics. F1 score is given from precision and recall, and precision from the inside of this circle we can see the true positives, which are correct predictions, and it gives equal importance to precision and recall. The other metric was AUC, which is area under curve for a receiver operating characteristic. Here is the example, and they both range those metrics between 0 and 1, 1 being like 100% correct. So AUC with 0.5 is, as we can see, unsatisfactory, so it's only 50% accurate, which is not satisfying. So results we got for these two metrics are F1 scores we got from a classification report for each class, and the average was 0.76%. AUC score was 84%, but using proba, we tried to get different values. It gives different values to predict. So proba gives values in array between 0 and 1, and predict gives values between 0 and 1, and proba gives float numbers. So, for example, 0.3, 0.7 would be 30% of the probability of result being 0 and 70% of result being 1. So overall, accuracies were acceptable. Here is the confusion matrix showing the dependencies on the input features. As we can see, number 2 and number 5 are case scratch and bumps. If we return, case scratch and bumps were 20% each of input features, and other faults was the biggest part. And the correlation can be shown here. So that is the conclusion, that it depends on the input values on the distribution. And thank you. That's it. Thank you for your attention, and to assistants who provided the references and shared the knowledge.
Are there any questions from the audience? No? Okay. I have only one question for you. Could you somehow improve the F1 and AUC score?
Well, AUC score overall is for every value together, but AUC and ROC, so the curve can be determined for each class, like 1 versus 1 and 1 versus rest scores. But scores would probably further improve if the inputs, if the outputs were evenly distributed. So if the database, in same like in other cases, if the database is distributed evenly.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We are at the end of the section 2. The next section will begin at 4 o'clock, and the section moderator for third section will be Professor Radwanovic. So we'll have a long coffee break for about 56 minutes. So see you at 4 p.m.
Okay, good day to everyone. I'm Vedran Mrdak and I will be a host of the third section of RISTEM conference. At the beginning of this session, we have a paper, a brief note on the influence of storage choices on machine learning algorithm training times. The authors Sandi Baresi Šegota, Daniel Štipanić, Jelena Musulin, and Zlatan Car. So, colleague Baresi Šegota, please present your paper.
Yes, thank you. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So my name is Sandi Baresi Šegota. I work at the Faculty of Engineering and I am a doctoral student here. And today I will present you a little note on the influence of storage choices in machine learning algorithms training times. So essentially the issue we are trying to consider here is something that's familiar to everyone who has worked with machine learning algorithms, and that is that training times for such models is extremely high. There is a number of techniques such as transfer learning that can help speed up this process, but there's one factor that I haven't seen commonly considered, and that is since these algorithms are data-driven, they are trained using the data, and usually extremely large amounts of data. Does the storage influence exist? So what do I mean by this? Essentially, we have a large amounts of data stored on different storage types, such as an SSD or a hard disk drive. Will this influence how fast are our algorithms train? So to discuss, how have we done the training in this research? We have done the training on CPU and GPU using two different architectures, and we have used 4 different storage options. Solid state drive, which are known to be significantly fast, hard disk drive as standard magnetic drive, which is today one of the cheapest ways to access mass storage locally. We have used the RAM disk, which is essentially just mounting a drive within our random access memory. RAM disks are known to be extremely fast and have shown and are commonly used for data-intensive tasks such as this in other fields of computing. And finally, a remote access to the data. By remote access, I mean a local network remote access where the data is stored on one server and accessed remotely from another server within the same network, so not accessing the completely remote locations such as an Amazon cloud or similar. Why wasn't this tested? Simply because there are too many variables to account for, such as the connection speed, etc. For the architectures which were used for testing, there were 2, multi-layer Perceptron and AlexNet. The multi-layer Perceptron has been used on a numeric dataset with 1000 instances, 6 inputs and 1 output. And the AlexNet dataset has been made up of 1000 images, which were formatted by the standard ImageNet format, 224 pixels by 224 pixels. Both datasets are uniformly randomly generated to avoid any influence on the training times by data itself. To get the training times, they were run. Each algorithm was on each storage option was run 10 times to get some at least somewhat statistically significant data. And the execution time was used for evaluation. As people who are here with computing background know, there are different ways to measure the execution time. This basically means that the time, this is basically the sum of time the algorithm spends between the kernel execution and between the user mode execution. And as the execution of the programs can be blocked from the execution by the operating system, paused because another more highly important process is requesting information. That isn't included in here, obviously, because we are trying to measure the performance of the algorithm. It doesn't matter if it was paused. We're just looking at the complete execution time of the algorithm itself. So after the algorithm is measured, you can see here the results for multilayer perceptron and AlexNet on when trained on the CPU. It should be noted. I have a pointer somewhere here. Yes. So it should be the first thing that we can note is that the execution times for the AlexNet are, when using a CPU architecture, is extremely higher than the multilayer perceptron, which uses numerical data as opposed to the image data. When we compare the times between each of the models by themselves, we see that the times are more or less within the margin of errors. The margins are constructed simply by taking the maximal and minimal possible value obtained in the 10 executions, and the middle point is the average of those 10 executions. We can note that here all of the solutions fall within the range of the error of the other solutions, and the same can be noted for the AlexNet. When it comes to the GPU, we can note a very similar thing. The training times are much closer. Now, obviously, AlexNet is a convolutional neural network, and it's going to run much faster using a GPU architecture. Again, all the solutions fall within the ranges of errors of one another. The only outstanding piece of data that we received is the remote data access when training using the graphical processing unit. This is probably due to issues with loading, so kernel level issues with loading the data from the remote into the GPU's memory when it comes to the image data. And we can see that drum disk got the lowest variance here. So what can be concluded from what we observed? Well, the first thing is that time variance that gets introduced by using different storage is negligent. With measured cases falling within margin of error of one another. What does this mean? It means that we can, for standard datasets, someone may ask the question, why can't we use significantly larger datasets, 200,000 images, something like that? Well, I tried to observe the realistic cases in here that are about the sizes we use. So in those realistic cases, we can see that the data doesn't really, where data is stored doesn't really matter, so we can just use the cheapest possible option, which will very probably be using hard disk drives. And one thing that can be noted if we go back to the comparison of execution times on CPU and GPU is that usage of appropriate architectures to the models for training, whether that is a GPU or CPU, depending on our case, has a much higher influence on training times than storage options will have. That is all for me. If you have any questions, please, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Do we have any questions related to this presentation? Okay, if there are no any questions, then we will continue and go on the second paper, forest cover type prediction based on cartographic parameters used neural network. Colleague Lazar Dasic will present its paper.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can hear you and we see presentation.
Great. So, my name is Lazar Dasic, and today I'll be talking about forest cover type prediction based on cartographic parameters using neural network. And the first question that rises from this name of the research paper is what exactly is forest cover type? And it is simply the type of certain tree species that is dominant on some terrain. And why is it important to know this information is because it is the crucial part of managing the natural resources of any private or state-owned property. And traditional way of obtaining this information was by some field personnel that would go on the terrain and research the trees. But as you may know, this is both time and cost consuming. And even in some cases, it is not possible to do due to inaccessibility of wilderness areas. But alternative method is using predictive models. And this idea is not really new. In 1999, Blackard and Dean used feed-forward 3 layers artificial neural network model with the goal of improving accuracy of prediction over traditional statistical model based on Gaussian discriminant analysis. But due to limitations of the time, at the time, as well as technology, as well as a field of artificial intelligence, they only achieved accuracy of around 70.58%, which is not really usable. So the goal of this research was to be successful in improving this accuracy by implementing modern approaches in the field of neural networks. So here on the picture, we can see some of the tree types that are part of the data set. And here are some of the input data and output data of the data set used for training. So firstly, data set used for to feed the neural network comes from Roosevelt National Forest in Colorado, USA. The total area of park was divided into 581,012 raster cells, dimensions of 30 by 30 meter. And each cell is described by the following variables that you can see on the left side. The output for each of the sample is the tree species that is dominant in that area. So we can have spruce fir forest, lodgepole pine forest, ponderosa pine forest, cottonwood/willow forest, aspen forest, Douglas fir forest, and Krummholz forests. As you can see, the dataset is not balanced, which affects results at the end, but I will talk about that more about that later. So now that we know what the goal of this research is and that we know the dataset used, we can finally say that the problem that neural network will have to solve is multi-class classification. And for those who are not aware, multi-class or multinomial classification is problem of classifying instances into 1 or 3 or more of more classes. Now, the choosing of the right hyperparameters is significantly easier because we know what we need to accomplish. So the input parameters that are marked with numbers from 1 to 10 are both in integer form, but they're on different scales. You can see that some use meters, some use degrees, some use indexes, and the data that is not normalized is usually not giving good results. So firstly, we need to normalize this data, and it was done with simple min-max scalar. Now that data is in the format that will give better accuracy of prediction, as well as faster and more stable training process. Following the successful normalization, we split data into following data sets. We have training dataset, validation dataset, and test dataset. And from tinkering with these different aspects, the aspect ratio of 60% for training dataset and 20% for each test and validation dataset was found to give the best results. Of course, it is important to note that before splitting, the data was shuffled, because originally the total dataset was sorted by wilderness areas designation, and thus it was not representative of the overall distribution of the data. Shuffling also reduces variance and makes sure that model remain general and overfit less. Now that we are aware of a data set, we can go to make our neural network model. And this was done by process of trial and error and tinkering with different hyperparameters. So the final model was given here. So the architecture was a 4-layer totally connected neural network, where the number of neurons in each layer was here as follows. It is important to notice that the number 7 in the final layer is such because each neuron represents one of the 7 tree types that are appearing in the data set. And as for the activation functions, ReLU function is used in layers 1, 2, and 3. And in the final layer, a softmax function was used. And this is common combination to use in multi-class classification. As for a loss function or the sparse categorical cross entropy was a pretty obvious choice because we are doing a multi-class classification and our data is integer format. Advantage of using sparse categorical cross entropy is it saves time in memory as well as computation because it simply uses a single integer for a class rather than a whole vector. As for training algorithm or optimizer used for neural network learning is stochastic gradient descent. And this is probably the most known and most commonly used algorithm, even though today it is slowly being replaced by ADAM or ADAGRAD that are built on SGD. Of course, I tried using ADAM and ADAGRAD, but although they converged faster, at the end, the results were pretty similar, but SGD with right learning rate gave a better generalization. As for right learning rate, the learning rate of 0.1 was found to be optimal. The learning process of 50 epochs is also found to be right amount where we get good accuracy while not taking too much time training it. And as for accuracy, the accuracy was 19.19%, which is quite good and makes model usable. So here is the training process. And we can see that after 50 epochs, we reached with accuracy of around 90%, and our accuracy started to plateau. So thus for making any further epochs unnecessary and pointless. As for the training process itself, it took approximately 17 seconds per epoch, which contributes to around 50 minutes training time. But of course, training time is highly dependent on computing power. Thus, on more powerful computers, time could be reduced to several minutes or even seconds. Now, as for the results on test data set, this is the accuracy for each of the tree types. As we can see, the accuracy is pretty high for some cases, but in the case of cottonwood willow forest, aspen forest, and Douglas fir forest, we can see that accuracy is significantly lower. And this is because there is not enough samples for this data, as we can see from here. So this gives hope that if we had a bigger data set, or we maybe fill data set with more samples, the results would be even better. So also, besides accuracy, important important metric of success of neural network is confusion matrix. As we can see here, we can see what forest types neural network confused most often. So we can see that the neural network had problem distinguishing between spruce fir and lodgepole pine because they grow on a pretty similar terrain. Also, it had problems with mistaking ponderosa pine with Douglas fir as well. So, as the final note, this study successfully showed that the model that Blackard and Dean used in 1999 can be improved drastically with change of hyperparameters for more modern options that are better suited for multi-class classification problem.
Besides showing progress made in the field of neural network, progress in computation power is showed with the time spent on training neural network. So the total training time was reduced from 45 hours in 1999 to around 15 minutes on average consumer-grade computer. And with the accuracy of over 90%, this neural network model can be confidently used for managing natural inventory of Roosevelt National Forest. But for future work, this neural network model can be modified in a way that will make it usable for predicting forest cover types of other wilderness areas, perhaps the forest in Russia or Amazon forest of South America, and thus making it usable in more general sense of way. So that would be all from this presentation. Is there any questions?
Thank you, colleague Dasic. Do we have any questions related to this topic? Well, I have one question. Colleague Dasic, you presented just one neural network architecture. Do you try more of them or just that presented?
Of course, as I said before, this is the final model that was achieved by a trial and error process. I tried with different number of layers and different number of neurons in each layer, as well as trying different activation functions, loss functions, and learning rate. But most of the time, I tinkered with the learning rate because finding just the right learning rate was pretty difficult process. Because if learning rate was too high, we would skip local minimum. And if learning rate was too low, the training process would take too long. So yeah, I tried, I think, several dozens of different models, and this is the model that gave best results.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, colleague Dasic. We will continue with next presentation. It's paper gate speed prediction from the walking parameters used MLP regressor. Colleague Dejan Radulovic and Dino Negovanovic.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you see the screen?
When we see the screen.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is Dino Negovanovic and today I will present an article on which colleague Dejan Radulovic and I were working, titled Gate Speed Prediction Based on Walking Parameter Using MLP Regression. So as an introduction, the problem to be solved is the predictive gate speed from the other gate parameter using a multi-layer perceptron. By applying the methods of artificial intelligence, more precisely the multi-layer perceptron, it is possible to regress the gate speed valued from the dataset. Gate classification dataset was created by calculating the walking parameters of total 16 different volunteers, 7 female and 9 male. This is a public data which we downloaded from UCA machine learning repository. In order to calculate each walking parameter, people were asked to walk a 30-meter long course for 3 rounds. As mentioned earlier, gate data contains the following parameters: basic parameters, temporary parameters, spatial parameters, and height parameters. After the analysis of the data, it was necessary to regress the first column of the dataset, which is speed, from all other parameters using a multi-layer perceptron in the Python programming language. So at the beginning we have our shared dataset file, and it contains x and y variables, where x represent the gate data and y represent the person information from the relevant sample. First of all, it was necessary to convert .mat to .csv format in order to be able to open it in Microsoft Excel for easier feature analysis. The conversion was done using the Pandas library. Next, something about multi-layer perceptron. It is a type of a feed-forward neural network characterized by single output, multiple inputs, and one or more hidden layers. For a given set of input data, which is X, and given set of the output data, which is Y, a neural network can learn an approximate nonlinear function for classification or regression. In this case, we use the regression. So each neuron in the hidden layer transforms the sum of the input values and the weight factor by applying the activation functions. We use a lot of different activation functions, and in the result, the best one will be showed. That is logistic activation functions. So the output layers receive the value from the hidden layers and transform them into output values. Furthermore, variable X contains only dataset features without tags. The tag is speed on our case. On the contrary, variable Y contains only tags without features. Additionally, 80% of the dataset is randomly selected for training, and the remaining 20% of the data is used to test the model. One important factor in the performance of the NLP regressor models are its hyperparameters. So, since it's difficult to guess the best parameter for the regression, tuning the hyperparameters is performed using grid search CV and cross-validation. The grid search CV is the process of performing hyperparameters tuning in order to determine the optimal value for the given model. In general, the cross-validation is a resampling procedure used to validate machine learning models on a limited data sample. After optimization, along with the best regressive model, prediction result, mean error, and standard deviation are displayed using a dictionary. The tables below are used to show the performance of the regressive model changes. So total variance explained by model total variance, so R square, mean squared error values RMSE, and standard deviation are given in the tables, as well the predicted and the true values of the particular number of hidden layers in each test. As we can see, the first test, despite the fact that training lasts much longer on contrary of the other one, for this case, the smallest values of error and the smallest deviations of the predicted walking speed from the true values are obtained. The next test, as we expected, we reduced the number of neurons in the hidden layers. As expected, the training loss is shorter than in previous case, but the deviation between the predicted and exact values are also increased. The following test, we further reduce the size of the model and expect less time required for the training and the greater deviation in this case. The last two cases, we notice the largest deviation and the inability of the model to correctly predict the mark due to the given limits in the number of hidden layers. From the result of numerical experiment, it's concluded that the multi-layer perceptron, more precisely MLP regressor, better predicts the value of gate speed with a larger number of hidden neurons in the layers. Likewise, the greater number of hidden neutrons result in a longer neural network training time and reduced error in the predicting gate speed values. Potential points for the future work will be additionally optimizing of the hyperparameters and the possibility of predicting a walking speed for a specific volunteer. At the end, we would like to thank you, assistants Sandy Baresi-Shagota and Nicola Angelic, for the mentorship during the work on this project and article. We also thank you for the opportunity to participate at the RISC-STEM convention. If you have any questions, go ahead.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, thank you, colleague Nikolanovic. We will continue to the next paper. The next paper is face mask classification using MLP classifier. Colleague Tin Ladic and Ante Mandekic.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, just a second. Can you see the presentation?
And we see a presentation.
Okay. Good day to everybody. My name is Ante, and I will be presenting work by my colleague Tenradic and myself. Our work is phase mask classification using multi-layer Perceptron classifier. Through this presentation, I will be showing you dataset and methodology we use to acquire the best results. As said previously, our task was using multi-layer Perceptron classifier, short MLP classifier, for phase mask classification. This work was inspired with our current situation, where there is a global pandemic COVID-19. Throughout most of the world, phase masks have become mandatory to wear in public places to prevent the spread of infection. This rules has created a need to monitor people's compliance with epidemiological guidelines. For these reasons, our work will present image recognition whether a person wears a face mask or not. This use of machine learning for image classification can help us improve efficiency of detecting who complies with epidemiological guidelines and who doesn't, which will then help us in stopping the spread of COVID-19 infection. Dataset that was used for training and testing contains 3,725 images with mask and 3,828 images without mask. To be exact, 75% of dataset was used for training and the rest of 25% for testing. The images were converted to grayscale so that can be used in MLP classifier. The sizes of images were converted to 64 by 64. On the image 1, you can see an example of image with a mask, and on the image 2, you can see an example without a mask before the converting to grayscale. Now I'll be talking about methodology used to get the best results. First of all, what is a multi-layer Perceptron? It is a neural network learning with a teacher. It consists of input and output layers of neurons and of hidden layers of neurons. All input neurons are connected to neurons in the first hidden layer, and then they are connected to the second hidden layer, and so on, depending on the number of hidden layers. Programming code was written in Python programming language. The scikit-learn library was installed because it contains the MLP classifier used to train neural network. The MLP classifier only works if input variables are vectors. Images are imported as matrix, in this case 64 by 64, so it is necessary to transform them into vectors. Output variables are denoted with zeros and ones. In this case, ones are with mask and zeros without mask. After we transform them into vectors, we randomize their position in input-output layer so that we don't have all with mask images one after another and all without mask images one after another. After sorting input and output variables, we continued to neural network training parameters. First, we compared 4 different activation functions in MLP classifier to find out if one of them gives best results. 4 activation functions are time, identity, logistic, and rel. For the purpose of comparing all 4 activation functions, we use the hidden layer of 200 neurons each. In table, you can see that we used 5 different MLP classifier parameters. As you can see, solver Adam and alpha 0.001 in the first row. From the first row, we can conclude that rel activation function provides the best results, and if we continue to look the results in other parameters, the best activation functions was rel. So So it was concluded from that point that ReLU activation functions will be used for all other tests. The next round of testing, we compared how hidden layers of neurons influence the result. As we look at the first row, the last parameter for hidden layers has the best results. But if we look at a third row, it's not the case. The first column has the best results. And if we look at fourth row, the second column has the best results, and so on and so on. After testing, it was concluded that increasing number of hidden layers and number of neurons in them does not necessarily improve the prediction results. So there is no, even if you think that it's going to be with the higher number of neurons and layers that's going to be improved, it is not the case in practice. After testing hidden layer of neurons influence on prediction results, we continued with trial and error method, changing different parameters to get the best results. The parameter presented on the slides are used to obtain best accuracy. Activation function was ReLU, solver was Adam, alpha was 0.021, and size of the hidden layer is 8 with the number of neurons seen on the slide. And the best accuracy obtained is 83.85%, which is a high accuracy rate. We have here we have two images. On the image 3, we can see a training loss curve. It shows training loss in each interval. Training stopped after the difference in loss was negligible. As we can see, after 120 iteration, it didn't change. It was negligible change in difference. And in image 4, we can see a confusion matrix where we can see how many images it got right and how many of them were false detections and undetected masks. As we can see, it predicted that without mask correctly 770, but then it had false detections 148, and then we see that he successfully detected 814 with mask, but didn't detect 157. This work presents the use of MLP classifier for face mask classifications. The results are good, not the best, but still usable with 83.85% accuracy rate. It is believed that if we had an even bigger database, that the network would be better trained and would provide better results. And that is all from my presentation, from our presentations. We would like to thank you for allowing us to appear on this conference and for all the work that was necessary to create this conference. Thank you and have a good day. If you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you, colleague Mandekic. Do we have any questions? Okay, if we do not have any questions, we will proceed to the last presentation of this section, and that is use of regressive artificial intelligence and machine learning methods in modeling of COVID spread, COVID-I project review. Angela Blagojevic, Tijana Šušteršić, Ivan Lorencin and Nenad Filipovic.
Okay, thank you, Vedran. I will share my screen. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, hello everyone. Greetings from Serbia, from Kragujevac and University from Kragujevac. I'm really glad to be part of this conference and to present COVID AI project. Well, this project was collaboration between University of Rijeka, actually Faculty of Engineering, and the University of Kragujevac. So the title of the project was Use of Regressive Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Methods in Modeling of COVID-19 Spread. I will use COVID AI for the next slide. So actually, this is the project review. So let's start the presentation. First of all, I have to say that this project was financed by Central European Initiative. And as I mentioned, the project consortium or project partners contain University of Kragujevac, University of Rijeka, Faculty of Engineering, and Clinical Center Rijeka. And this project started at July 2020 and ended at December 2020. So we worked on this project last year. Well, the most important thing, project activities. During this project, we developed two models, a personalized AI model for COVID-19 prediction and epidemiological model for COVID-19 prediction. And these two gives us a COVID AI tool, which consisted of these methods. And it's important and significant in order to help medical experts and clinicians, doctors, to decide whether the patient will be subjected to further analysis and prescribe therapy. And for example, if our software classified one patient as low risk of mortality or mild clinical condition, we can be sure that that patient shouldn't stay in hospital or intensive care unit. Another part, an epidemiological model, is significant in order to help in providing useful data in terms of prediction and epidemiological events. So this is important in order to save time and gives a healthcare system and society a fast response on the pandemic. So now I will talk about personalized AI model and give some more detailed information about this model. So first of all, I will talk about data. Data was collected in the clinical center in Rijeka and in the clinical center of Kragujevac. So we were collaborating with doctors which and collected the data for our personalized model. The goal of this model is to predict disease progression of the patient with COVID-19 in advance. So the inputs of the model is divided in 4 groups. First group is demographic data, for example, age of COVID-19 patients. Second group is clinical image. This refers to symptoms such fever, pain, muscle, headache, and something like that. The third group, blood test data or biomarkers data, is a very important group. This group consisted of 40 blood analyses, such as white blood cells, lymphocytes, urea, and many others. Imaging data, this is also a very important group. we used X-ray images and CT scans from this group. So the output of the model, we predicted the mortality risk, as I mentioned, or the severity of clinical condition. From the aspect of mortality risk, we had 4 classes: low risk, medium, high, and very high. On the other hand, from the clinical condition, we had mild, moderate, severe, and critical clinical condition. So everything I said you can see on this image. Second part of the personalized model is a patient-specific lung model based on finite element analysis. So we concluded that COVID-19 pneumonia have some unique features. This is the fast progression to respiratory failure. So we decided to make patient-specific lung model, and the focus was to simulate the spread of SARS-CoV-2 virus to many regions of the lungs from the initial site of infection. On this picture, you can see a 3D model, and on the right image, you can see how the virus spread. Next is the epidemiological model. So we developed 3 models. First is based on the partial differential equations, and the second and third one are based on artificial intelligence. The second model is MLP, multi-layer perceptron, and the third one is based on genetic programming, GP. And the data was collected by, actually we used official data from the World Health Organization, Johns Hopkins University, and Institutes of Public Health from the several countries. And on this image, you can see that as input of our COVID-19 tool, we used that official statistical reports. As output, we got some curves of COVID-19 spread in population. The population can be one city, a region, state, etc. So, of course, we achieved some results during this project. And from the section of personalized model, we published 1 paper, and the other one is in the process of review. So the published paper is actually estimation of the clinical condition of the patient from the X-ray images of the lungs. We used a few convolutional neural networks, such as AlexNet, VGG16, ResNet 50, ResNet 101, and ResNet 152. And the best classification performances was achieved by ResNet 152, and area under the curve is up to 0.94. So next paper, which is in the process of review, is the pretty same thing, actually estimation of clinical condition of the patient, but from the blood biomarkers or blood tests. So for this paper, we used some boosting methods for the prediction of biomarkers. First of all, we used some feature selection algorithms to get the most important features or biomarkers. Then we predicted that most important features, and then we classified them in 1 of 4 classes. As I mentioned, low risk, high risk, very high risk, and medium risk, of course. And we achieved accuracy up to 90%. So from the epidemiological section, we published 2 papers. Both of them use genetic programming algorithm. First paper is actually estimation of the spread of COVID-19 disease in China, Italy, and Spain. And the second one is the spread of COVID-19 disease in USA. And we achieved our square score of 0.99, almost 1. And next, I will show you our project video for more detailed information about these models and hyperparameters and many other things.
COVID AI project proposes a novel approach using regressive artificial intelligence and machine learning methods to model COVID-19 spread. Main activities performed within the COVID AI project include development of several models. Personalized AI model for COVID-19 prediction, which includes monitoring the patient condition and prediction of severity of clinical condition in advance. An epidemiological model, which includes monitoring of the number of people infected with COVID-19 on a level of population. Let's dive into each one of them. The aim of personalized model is to classify the patient's clinical condition into one of the 4 categories based on clinical data of patients and X-ray imaging. This personalized model starts from patient data. Developed, COVID AI tool uses machine learning methods for supervised and unsupervised learning to mine heterogeneous patient data. As a result, COVID AI tool can determine the severity of clinical condition of the patient: mild, moderate, severe, and critical. Investigated patient data include biomarkers such as demographic data, symptoms, and blood analysis, as well as X-ray images of the infected patient. In addition to several machine learning methods, such as genetic programming and recurrent neural networks, COVID AI uses boosting methods for prediction and classification of COVID-19 disease progression. Such tool will help medical experts to decide whether the patient will be subjected to further analysis and prescribed adequate therapy. The obtained results are assessed values of blood biomarkers and determination of severity of clinical condition. Additionally, X-rays of the patients have been collected within Clinical Center Kragovec and separated into 4 severity groups based on patient's clinical picture: mild, moderate, severe, and critical. Due to a limited number of collected images, data augmentation has been applied. This results in much larger data set than the original. 5 different convolutional neural networks have been used: AlexNet, VGG16, ResNet50, ResNet101, ResNet152. All of the networks in question have been developed as a deep convolutional image classification networks, optimized for transfer learning and demonstrate high performance in the image classification tasks. The best performing classifier was proved to be ResNet152, the largest neural network used. The best results have been achieved with layer freezing, NADAM solver, a large batch size of 16 and 100 epochs. The area under curve scores achieved with the described hyperparameters are in excess of 0.95, which is a satisfactory value for such a complex classification problem. In addition to the described personalized model, finite element-based numerical simulation of the spreading of SARS-CoV-2 variant in the lungs is made within COVID AI project. COVID AI project implements several methods for following epidemiological situation, include genetic programming and an epidemiological model based on differential equations. The model starts from official statistical data for a certain population, for example, country. Further, the model itself includes tracking of the susceptible individuals exposed individuals, infected individuals, individuals who have recovered from disease, and dead individuals. The main impact of this model is that predictive models based on machine learning can provide useful data in terms of prediction of epidemiological events, which can save time for timely and optimal response of both the health system and the society. For more information on COVID AI project, please visit our website and follow us on social networks. COVID AI.
So, as it said, for more information and for more detailed explanation, you can contact us or visit our website. And thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the video. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I have a comment, if that will be okay. Essentially, I just wanted to thank our friends from Kragujevac for not only this great presentation, thank you, Angela, but for our cooperation on this project, and we hope that we'll get a chance to work on more further projects in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Do we have any other questions or comments?
I would like to add also that it was our pleasure to work with you on this project, and it's been a great organization from your side regarding the conference. I would like to give my greetings, and it's been a great pleasure to see all of you presenting your papers. Some of them are very advanced and not on the level of your students, but more of a level of PhD students. So I know that you're just at the beginning of your research, but it's been really great to hear you all how you have advanced and how have you really achieved great results. I would be really happy to work with all of you, and I hope that this conference has give you insight into what other people do and what kind of research has been done both in Rijeka and Kragujevac and all other places. So it would be interesting to see you all in a couple of years to see how you have advanced and what other great results you have achieved in the future. So good luck with all of that, and really looking forward to meeting you all in future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, this was the last session of the RISTEM conference, but there is one more thing, one more big thing, and that is the last session, closing session, which will be held by colleague Ivan Lorenzin. Ivan, thank you. Take your time.
Thank you, Professor Mrzak. As far as I can see, all remaining colleagues here are from our language region. So in a circular manner, I will now convert to Croatian or Serbian language. Tako da imam nekoliko stvari samo još da vam reći. Prva stvar je da su potvrde o sudjelovanju na konferenciji i proceedings konferencije na web stranici konferencije, tako da svi koji su zainteresirani molim da skinu. Pa ako ima kakvih eventualnih nedoumica da nam se jave, mi ćemo to odmah ispraviti. Druga stvar ovako tehničke prirode je ta da sutra oko podne koji iz Rijeke koji je zainteresiran nam se može pridružiti u jednom mini druženju u ime ove konferencije koje će se održati kod nas u kantini. Tako da još malo popričamo ako tko ima kakvih pitanja ovako licem u lice. I sada ovako malo neformalnu stvar. Kao prvo htio bih zahvaliti kolegama iz Kragujevca, stvarno nam je čast raditi s vama i stvarno nam je čast bila upoznati još vaše studenti, članove vašeg tima koje nismo imali priliku putem ovog COVID-19 projekta. Stvarno radite velike stvari i jako nam je drago što ste se uključili u ovogodišnju konferenciju koja je ujedno bila i prva. Tako da se nadamo da ćemo druge godine imati priliku održati konferenciju uživo koja će nam biti, recimo to tako, bolja za druženje, bolja za razmjene ovih iskustava i naravno da malo u ovo doba već je toplo, da se možda i malo vi i ovdje okupate u našem predivnom moru. Što bih htio reći vezano za naše studente, evo stvarno smatram da je ovo jedna velika stvar, veliko iskustvo koje će vam omogućiti da nastavite svoj put što u znanstvenom, što u stručnom smislu. Kad sam ja bio student, ovakve stvari nisu se održavale i zahvaljujući profesoru Caru imao sam priliku sudjelovati na Intechu 2018. godine, međutim većina studenata takvo iskustvo nema priliku dobiti. Tako da stvarno govorimo, to je velika stvar i jako mi je drago da ste iskoristili i nadam se da će što više studenata koristiti i drugih godina pa da možda ovo sve pretvorimo i u višednevni događaj. Što bih htio reći da bio sam na više konferencija i studenti kako iz Kragujevca, tako iz Rijeke. Mogu vam reći da ste pokazali vrhunsku kvalitetu prezentacije i da je ovo bilo na razini, kao što je kolegica Tijana rekla, i doktorskih studenata. Tako da, evo, pljesak od mene, svaka čast svima. Evo ga, ja sam rekao sve što je bilo tehničke prirode, kažem, nadam se da ćemo se druge godine vidjeti uživo, licem u lice, da će ova nesretna pandemija već i završiti i htio bih svima poželiti ugodan dan. Hvala vam što ste sudjelovali i za sva pitanja i eventualne komentare stojimo na raspolaganju na našim Facebook stranicama i na našim e-mail i brojima telefona. To je to, želim vam svima ugodan dan, lijepo se zabavite i živjeli.
Pozdrav!
Hvala vama, pozdrav!